in gaming groups that I'm in conversations that I've heard, there are so many people who just, I'm sorry, I can't access this. It's overwhelming. It's not fun for me. And so I think just changing the way that we think about things and the way that we create things, it has to happen so that more people can come in and be a part of it.
Shifting gears a little bit, a core aspect of your community and the content that you create is the focus on neurodiversity. And here on LLAG, we talk a lot about racial and economic discrimination in the workplace. But I think a failure on my part is that we don't often talk about the plight of the neurodiverse community. And, for people who don't understand that there is this entire university of inequality that exists, can you tell us more about how the neurodiverse communities fight for freedom fits within the overall push for progressive and systemic change? Like, for people who this isn't even on their radar, why should this be on their radar?
There is an entire community that is dealing with issues of accessibility. And it's not just people hear the word neurodiversity and they immediately think of like autistic people. And even though this term is super ableist and I hate it, they think of what they considered low functionally. But the problem with that is that while so my two boys, both are autistic. But my first has an intellectual disability, where my second does not. There are things that my oldest can do within his capabilities that would paralyze my younger son. They're 17 and 16. And so there's a whole lot that my oldest would be able to do that, you know, um, being more engaging with people. He's very affectionate. He loves cuddles still. Um, but my younger son, the 16-year-old, would be paralyzed by those things. It's just not who he is. And so when he was younger, we've never made them hug anyone, but people who would insist on hugging Cameron, my oldest, um, you know, they would hug him and he'd be fine with it. Zachary wanted to run every single time, which is why we don't make them hug people. And so I think the idea that there is this sense of high functioning and low functioning to determine what services are needed for these people over here and what services are needed for these people over there. And the fact that you have to match, there is no goddamn reason people have to have eye contact. Just none. And I think that, you know, even within like the limitations that we put on people based on our expectation is ridiculous. And there are so many neurodiverse people who, yeah, they might need this or that adjusted in order to, even going back to what we had on the page earlier, like way back in October, on voter suppression. Like an autistic person standing in that line might have a very, very, very difficult time with that. There are having to be there for hours, like all the noise surrounding it, the chaos surrounding it, that could be debilitating. And so kind of creating these new ways to do things so that accessibility is open is something that we really need to do, even with things that no one thinks of. Board games, for example. I have a large board game collection, and I love deck building games. And deck building games are basically you have points to buy things, points to fight things, and you are collecting new cards so that you can fight the bigger bads. And with one of my favorites, one of my first deck building games was a Harry Potter based game. And with every new um, level, you have to reset your hand back down to 10. I think that's stupid. And the excuse they gave it is you did not study over the summer. And fucking Hermione Granger would never not study over the summer. So I think that's a shit reason to basically say that, you have to go back down to 10. But I've noticed in gaming groups that I'm in conversations that I've heard, there are so many people who just, I'm sorry, I can't access this. it's overwhelming, it's not fun for me. And so I think just changing the way that we think about things and the way that we create things, it has to happen so that more people can come in and be a part of it.
Yeah, and that's what I, you know, started to learn from a lot of the conversations that you've been having about these topics, because it really is just that shift in mindset of, oh, this is a thing that I enjoy, but because of the way that it's designed, other people can't enjoy it the same way that I enjoy it. And I think looking at it that way, you're like, oh, and that's why I'm so glad that, you have the series See What I Mean, and all these different series talking about these different topics, because there's just so much ableism, and there's so many different aspects of our society that we just take for granted because we're like, oh, well, I like it and I enjoy how it is, but we don't think about how other people might be, it might be a completely different experience. We might be sort of alienating people from that.